If you clicked on this video, it is probably because you have a child that you need wisdom for. That is what we do today on this episode of Redeeming Truth. Welcome to the Redeeming Truth podcast. My name is John, and I'm here with some really helpful minds when it comes to tech and parenting. This is a significant issue. This is an issue that I know my home is dealing with. I know that many hundreds of homes within Redeemer Bible Church are dealing with, and there's got to be thousands, even millions beyond. And so we want to be helpful. We want to be practical. We want to give you some simple tools to help you navigate this minefield of technology. And I've specifically asked Brian Johnson to be a part of this. Brian is our CFO, our director of finance. But Brian, you have a unique background when it comes to technology, as well as you even do a seminar on this for parents. And so would just love to get to get us started.
Yeah, I appreciate it, John. And it is such a relevant topic. I think today when we think of what parents are facing because of the onslaught of social media and digital content that's just overwhelming with kids' attention and their affections, parents are really at a crossroads. I mean, there's so many struggles going on in the world with what society is attacking our kids with misinformation, with comparison, with all the other issues. But really, there's so much peer pressure in this too that we don't know where to start sometimes. We get a lot of opportunities to work in this space in both educating parents, building technology, partnering with organizations to help advance this, even in the legislative area, to help states and the federal level pass laws to help protect at a different level. But there's so much work going on in this space, but it's not happening fast enough for sure. So parents need better equipping.
And so Todd and Dave, I asked you guys to be on this because you have older children. And so you have already had to navigate this, whereas Dale and I, we have younger children. I mean, I have a 4-year-old. But he wants to be on his tablet, and so there's so much tension. You guys have had to navigate this and are done with it for the most part. And so that's why getting your practical wisdom, here's what we did, here's what worked, here's what didn't work. And I think Dale and I are just here like, okay, talk to us. Like,
if I'm not talking, it's because I'm taking notes on my phone right now.
That's exactly it. And so Brian, to get us started with this, I want to, is technology neutral? Like, is it something to where parents should be like, it doesn't matter, just go ahead, do whatever you want to do, police yourself? Like, is that something to where parents just shouldn't be that worried about this?
It is absolutely not neutral. You don't go into a library and let your kids just pick whatever books off the shelf or scroll TV stations and watch whatever they want. You absolutely shouldn't let them be on the internet, unmonitored, unmanaged. And every smartphone device that's given to a kid, as early as now 3 years old, we see a large adoption of kids. Parents are giving them a loaded gun. I mean, it is an extremely harmful and vulnerable stage of life to be informed by information that their parents aren't controlling. So it's not neutral in the sense that it's a very biased, very leaning and informing medium, and something that's not, while there's the aspect of technology that's a tool, it's also content. It's also idolatry wrapped in a cool, shiny object. So there's so much to unpack with how parents need to be vigilant with this and not just treat it as a neutral object.
Yeah, how did you guys handle this issue?
Yeah, I just installed like a power kill switch in my home and just shut it up now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, no.
I was like, okay, that's a good idea.
Right. Yeah.
Tell me more.
Yeah, mine too.
Who made that?
Yeah, so for us, we were seeing when our kids were little, we were in California, and kids as early as kindergarten, 5 years old, were getting phones with the internet on it. And so our kids were hanging out with them at the bus stop and all that kind of stuff, and it was kind of like, whoa, we're behind the 8 ball already with what our kids may have already seen, 5 years old. And so our kids were like, hey, can we have a phone? So that was when they were younger. We're like, of course not. So we actually waited until all of our kids were 14 years old because we needed time to think through the ramifications of what are we giving our children. And if we're not capable and ready to explain that to them, like just what you're getting, then why would we feel comfortable giving them something? Now 14 is just kind of a number, but every kid matures differently. And so, that I wouldn't go hard and fast rule on that, but we ended up having our children make a presentation to us to say, hey, if you want this, it's not something that you deserve. It's not something that you're guaranteed in life. You tell us what the pros of it are, what the cons of it are, which model should you get and why? Do they understand financial responsibility? If you're going to drop this thing that costs anywhere from $600 to $1,000, who's paying for the replacement and you don't have a job? That's me. So they actually took that very seriously, starting with our oldest, and it turned into an over 2-hour presentation of the pros and cons, and here's how I'm going to use it, and here's how I'm not going to use it, because they had wanted phones for years before we said, okay, yeah, I think you're thinking about this rightly. It's not that they maturely couldn't stay off of certain sites. I think they actually could have before then, but their thinking had to catch up with their heart, and that's right in the time when, their bodies they're all changing. And so last month, they're like a different child than they are this month. So it's really hard to keep up with your children. So we use that as a way to have just an extended dialogue of, why do you want this so much? And what do you want it for? If the only reason is because you're the only kid in middle school that doesn't have one yet, I don't really care. I just don't, you can tell your friends' parents, yeah, I'm the one who said they can't have that. And because my job is to protect you as a father. So, for others it might be younger, some it might be older. It just depends on the maturity level of your child. So that's how we started.
So Brian, I want to come back to you because you have all of this background in this, and you have children that you discipled in this, and so to be able to bring those two things together, I think is invaluable. But I want to hear from Todd, how did you navigate this with your kids?
Yeah, we made a big deal about getting a phone, especially a smartphone. We did let our oldest, because there are activities or things that they go on. Now, we homeschooled them, but they would still go to co-op and stuff. And so we bought just one of those burner phones that has no internet in case they needed to call us or we wanted to call them. And then when it came to 8th grade graduation, that was the big event. And we set the precedence with the first one, so the other two knew what was coming. And we gave our oldest a phone. And really, it wasn't hers, though. I said, I'm giving you Dad's phone, which is another phone, not my own phone, but this is Dad. Dad owns this, and here's a contract that goes with it. And I even pulled it up and looked at some of the things that we had on that contract. I adapted it and adopted it for some other resources. It wasn't all original or anything, others who had done that. And I love that idea, just to give them the understanding that this is a big deal. This is a great thing, too. But it comes with responsibility, and trust is a huge currency between that parent-child dynamic. If I can trust you with this, and there's a biblical dynamic there, if I can trust you with little, you'll be trusted. Here comes a phone, but in a few years, we're going to be talking car. And if you can't be trusted with this little thing, you're not going to be trusted with that big thing that's coming. And so you show your trustworthiness here, then the world, there's no limit to what we might trust you with. But if you show lack of discernment, lack of trust with this, so we had things like, we can look at your phone at any time. We can take it away at any time. You don't get to use it anytime you want to. And so I like that ongoing dialogue. It's a daily dialogue. What are you doing on the phone? Who are you talking to? And on top of that, then, we didn't allow them to add apps without our knowledge. And there was no social media until they turned 18. Just to be safe, in a sense. And so that's just where we landed with that. I know it's different based on different situations. In fact, one of our married daughters, we finally talked her into social media this year.
Talked her into it.
It was her own volition. She's like, I don't need it. It looks like a headache. But we talked her into it, like, hey, you're missing out on some of our family dynamics. And so that was kind of a cool thing. We're talking her into it as a married woman to finally join social media so she could be a part of some of the family dynamics that we were doing with that. But that's kind of where we landed with that. And that seemed to go really well for our kids. They understood that. They proved themselves. And, it's a constant test and trial. And some things we didn't do quite right, and we made adjustments, and sometimes they blew it in certain areas, and so we had to adjust that and maybe even put some heavier stuff on it until they once again proved themselves trustworthy, and so those were all good learning situations for mom and dad and for them as well.
Yeah, quick follow-up to that. We did the same thing where we said, anytime I want to see your phone, you need to give it to me. If you don't give it to me, you'll lose it permanently. And there's like, you have to mean what you say in parenting, right? It's not like they will call your bluff. And then also, you can't ever delete history. So you're not allowed to do private browsing, which is the default, I think, on Safari now or something. You're not allowed to do private browsing. You can't delete history. And if I see a gap, I'm going to assume you've done something you shouldn't, and you're going to lose the phone for that too. And then the question is when they get older, like, oh, well, are you transparent? Who can see your phone? So then, husbands, one just plain suggestion, like, don't have anything password protected that your wife can't get to, like ever, on your computer, your phone, anything. Same thing when you're watching TV, like if it makes your wife uncomfortable, if you're staying up for a while, just turn it all off, get your Bible, read something. But it turned into this reciprocal where they could see, are you living the values that you're teaching? And as maybe Brian could speak to more, the parental controls have made incredible leaps over just even the last 5 years on phones, as far as like app downloads, what they can spend their time on, even where your kids are, all those kinds of things, where it used to be kind of hard to track.
What I love about what both of you guys said is that I know for me growing up, it was, well, I'm 16, so that means I get a car. Like these were kind of rite of passage expectations where you guys said, like, no, these are not expectations. You are going to earn this. You're going to prove that you can have this. You don't get this because you reached a certain age. You get this because at this age in your life, you've proven yourself responsible enough to have it. And I think that's great.
Yeah, it's not protecting them from adulthood. It's preparing them for it. And so this is a training. While they're under my roof and under where I own the phones and everything, it becomes a great, just atmosphere to monitor their growth and to keep it tight when it needs to be, and to let the reins out as they prove themselves. And so, yeah, it's definitely that. And part of that too. One other thing too, I think that was really key is they could not let their friends use their phone unless of absolute case of emergencies. And so that was one. Because, they might be doing fine, but then they let their buddy borrow it, and who knows what their buddy's going to do. And so can't share your passwords, can't share your phone, only in emergency situations can. I think that's a key aspect.
That's great. So Brian, how did you navigate this knowing everything that you know in your background? And can you kind of introduce your background a little bit too?
Yeah, so I spent 30 years in technology. I worked at PayPal most recently. I was a global head of cybersecurity there and cyber fraud. So I know a bit about how people get hacked online and what kind of abuses there are. And I worked in technology at the level that I saw how the tech leaders were handling technology with their kids. Secular owners of companies like Apple and Amazon and Facebook didn't give phones to their kids. And I'm going, okay, what's going on here? And the prep schools in Silicon Valley, they didn't allow phones in their schools. And so you have these teenagers that are growing up in tech families from founders like Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, and they didn't have phones. They weren't given the iPads that you had, announced to the world and billions of people given to their kids because their parents knew they were bad. They knew that there was an evil that allows their kids access to before they're ready. So they started building in their own kind of internal expectations around how to do this. But apart from that, though, I think there's a theme here. So we started with the heart training and the same model of it's not an entitlement, it's a responsibility. Our limits included we did not give our kids phones until they were 16. And the only time we'd allow them to use it would be a flip phone, a flip burner phone, and that even has risks.
Do they even have those anymore?
Yeah,
do those exist?
Yeah,
okay.
Absolutely. But now there's tech. We can make an iPhone like a flip phone. We can actually make it a phone again. And I'll get more to that later. But yeah, the interesting thing with how parents approach technology today, though, is it's become so embedded in schools, in sports, in everything that you do that now they need it as a tool. I mean, there's a lot of cases where parents are kind of being bullied in by schools for their kids to use it, to know where their sports teams are playing, where their chorale group is practicing, where they have to be connected through social media and through scheduling tools. And so technology has become a required tool for many parents. So it's just not realistic for many parents to say, don't have a phone until 16. But they can apply a lot of basic controls. You guys talked about it at first. My wife Amanda and I started a parenting blog a long time ago called protectyounghearts.com. And the idea was to train the hearts. There's protection and there's heart training. And I believe that it starts with what you guys talked about earlier. It's, technology is not an entitlement that you deserve. It's a responsibility that you earn and you build trust and you maintain. And I'm big into trust and verify. So I also like to make sure that they don't always have full access. They check it in at night. They don't have it in bathrooms, bedrooms, boredom. These are threats to kids that you have to draw some parameters around as a parent and say, you don't bring your device to a bathroom. You don't use it in the bedroom by yourself. And when you're bored, you don't sit on a device. Those are bad threats to you. So we look at different areas of how to parent well and establish some of those ground rules. Our kids didn't have social media until they were 18. And our kids, by the way, are 24 down to 15. We have 4 kids. And the 24-year-old is now an advocate for safe tech. He's now building a company and working with groups of investors and entrepreneurs to help protect kids online, to protect kids from being exploited and exposed online, because we know the threats are significant. So our view, though, was, again, start with the heart, build some controls, and continue to have that conversation. And our controls and restrictions ranged from the very, very practical, why would you take your phone in your bedroom or bathroom? Don't do that. It's not allowed. To every phone is checked in at night and we have a charging station, and you check it in at night and we review it. We walk through stuff. Everybody knows everyone's passcodes. There's no secret passcode. If you want to look at my device, it's always open. Now there's some practical ramifications for sensitivity and confidential information with, people that you work with or whatever. But I never held it as an entitlement either. Never said to my kids, you can't open my phone. I always made that a modeled behavior that I'm as transparent as I expect you to be. So we had to start with also modeling our own hearts around the way that we deal with tech. I think a lot of parents struggle with that. So when you think of how do you heart train your kids around idolatry and social media and comparison, we have to check our own hearts and say, well, how are we handling that? How do we model that to our kids and set expectations for them too?
Yeah. That's great. So, Dale, this was actually your idea to even have this conversation.
That's why I got a front row seat to wisdom right here.
So is there, as you're processing all of this, what questions do you have?
Yeah, well, one thing as an affirmation is that even right now, my son is now in high school playing football. And, not like when we played where there's 3 reminders for playbooks now. Now everything's digital, right? And so there's apps. There's an app for that, right? So the expectation is that my son has access to an electronic device where he can open up this app to learn his playbook, right? And right now, that means he's taking my phone to do that, and he has to be with me to do that. But just to kind of double up on what Brian's saying, the expectation now is, even in Christian schools, is that kids have devices. And it's no longer even working with the parents. Like I've just found this out. Like there was no questions or, kind of like, what do you think about this? It's just, this is what's happening in the world today. And I don't fault them for that. I think that's something that's has taken place over a period of time where maybe the battle has just been lost, and they're just like, let's utilize these tools, to deliver information, to get playbooks going. And but it's put my wife and I in a pretty difficult situation, because both of my children desperately want phones, desperately want to be, I think somewhat like their friends. But I think for them, it's also a sense of freedom. It's a sense that I can go somewhere that I wouldn't be able to go otherwise. Right. And that's, for me as a father, is like, exactly. We don't want you to go there. Right. And so, because there are a lot of dangers out there, but I'm listening to the wisdom around the table, and I already have some helpful suggestions that I think my wife and I will be talking about. But to answer your question, John, why I wanted to do this, because I know I'm not the only parent out there that's dealing with this. And the men around this table are men that I trust and value their insights. And so I thought, if I do, maybe others would also be helped if I'm helped.
So talk to me about how you navigated, like where Dale's at, where I'm at, where you have kids that don't have the phones yet. They're not close to 14 or 16, but they want it. I get very frustrated with parents whose rules are not like mine, who gave phones to their kids when they're 9 years old, and now my 9-year-old wants a phone because you gave your kid one. Like, it just drives me crazy. But I just vented that, I don't think I've ever vented that before, actually.
We can counsel
maybe
later.
we can
It's
just
okay.
cut that out. But anyway, so talk to me about how you shepherded your kids when they really wanted that phone or that computer, that laptop, but they're not ready for it. And despite what other parents were doing, you were like, no.
Yeah, I think that's an age-old, long before technology, Christian parents have always stood against the culture. I remember being in high school and what's the right appropriate age to date? Same thing. Is it when you're 14, 16, 18? And so technology is one of several silos that we as Christians have to navigate when it comes to a cultural component, not being pressured, even by other Christians who maybe have different standards on that too. It's really a test of your own faith and resilience that you and your spouse have to be lockstep and uncaving from any kinds of pressures, even well-meaning pressures from anyone, to make sure that you are doing what ultimately at the end of the day, you've got to be held accountable to God for and your conscience. And so to really hold firm on that, and knowing that you're going to be nagged by your kids, or that's going to come up a lot, but to continue to communicate your love for them, your desire for what's best for them. And that doesn't mean it's the same thing for this family over here and your family. This is an area where mom and dad have some wisdom on this. We have some convictions on this. And ultimately, we love you, and there's nothing that we don't do that isn't about loving you. And so that's a constant message and opportunity to remind them that saying no to some things is the greatest act of love in your kids' lives, and for them to know that.
That's right.
Yeah, I think
Invite them in.
Yeah, absolutely. Being actively involved in the relationship with your child, where when you're at home, it's not what's going to just maintain their time so that you can do what you want to aside from them, but being actively engaged with them. I was talking about this even just a couple days ago, and we were talking about how to better engage our children who are even grown. And it's like, well, let's just talk to them and make sure that we're actually knowing what they're involved in, knowing what's important to them. And so the technology becomes less because they have this relationship where they want to spend time with you, and that's greater than the iPad. I think when our kids are growing up, all the baby Einstein stuff was coming out, and it's like, hey, you can buy these videos and have an hour to yourself. And so everybody was like, download. And, here it's like, but then after the hour, they just want it even more. And so we've learned about the algorithms, which you could speak to again, Brian.
The addictive nature,
It actually goes after an addictive nature. And they're I think, on the Just Thinking podcast, they were just talking about this social media in the digital age. And they actually have in the DSM now a category for a disease on social media, where it's an accepted disease, it's an addiction, whereas the biblical language for those things would be an enslavement. So always bringing your kids, no matter what their age, back to what does the Bible say about actions, behaviors, the heart, talking about James, with your youngest, it's like, okay, trying to get to that why question is pretty hard, but what do you like about this? Do you think this brings you closer to Jesus? Those kinds of questions, not so much so that their argument is with you, but with what is God's desire for you to grow as a young man or woman of God, and how is this thing, or for that matter, all the gaming systems can communicate just like this thing can to strangers all over the world in a heartbeat. So that's another dangerous area. But how do those things help you draw closer to Christ? Do you just put it in the fun category? Well, then how much of your day is just fun versus, hey, you could help mommy with this, you could help daddy with this, you could help be part of the family instead of the family needs to entertain you. So the mindset needs to shift to I'm an active part of this family. So I think a lot of it goes back to what's your relationship with your kids, no matter how young they are. Because once they get to 14, 16, 18, and you try and develop a relationship and take this away from them, that's just going to be very difficult.
Fortitude. You need fortitude. Be strong. And
Yes.
I get it. You get worn down and you want to give in and you want your kids to like you. And so, okay, I'll just go ahead and give in to that. But that's not going to be a long-term solution for them. And so encouraging any parents out there, stand strong.
Yeah, I think one of the battles is recognizing fear versus love, right? And I think a lot of time parents will act out of fear of what's going to get them, and that's a healthy fear, but they also respond out of fear rather than love. And sometimes you hear things like "because I said so," and there's not an explanation. Especially the older the child gets. I find myself talking to my 14-year-old about, do you understand why? Like, it's important for you to understand why we're doing this and why we're saying no at this point. And we've had the conversations with a little bit of responsibility. Trust can be built, and that can lead to more responsibility and more trust, right? We've had those conversations, but the reality is that he's feeling left out, right? And so I also have a job to do to kind of divorce myself from fear to try to understand where he's at. I don't want to just say because I said so. I want to be able to understand, like, what's going on in your heart. How can I shepherd your heart? You know, all of us as shepherds, we do this for the people in our church, all the more for our own children, right? So I'm trying to figure out, like, where are you coming from, right? And as a boy, he's not always the most communicative person in the world, but I'm trying to work with him to get to a place where he can communicate what's going on in his own heart. My daughter, coming up behind him, is a lot more vocal about, why she wants something. But for me, I don't want to give in to fear. I don't want to be ruled by fear. I want to be ruled by love for my children, and I want them to see the love I have for God and wanting to protect them as well. But also living in that tension of, I want them to mature. I want them to grow up and learn how to use these things in a way that's healthy.
Mm-hmm. So. Well, one thing too, I think when you base it on principle and conviction and kind of a sense of earning with multiple children, then you don't get, well, I got that when I was 16. How come, or I had to wait until I was 16 and he's 12, or you inevitably get that. I didn't get to see that movie until I was 20 and they're 12, or whatever, all those kind of things that go on. If you have it on principle, then it's not about some sort of arbitrary, and we talked about that a little bit at the beginning, but just a reminder to prepare yourself for, this kid may be ready at this age, this kid may be ready at this age, this kid may be ready at this age, and it won't be the same. And there's going to be some inner sibling dimensions to that will be an aspect of that, just to, again, stand strong in the midst of that.
And none of that is really unique to technology.
No, it's
and
not.
We're talking about parenting philosophies here. Parenting philosophy of helping your kids to not become idol worshipers, helping your kids to have self-control, helping them to build, a dependence on God and an independence from tech, helping them to look for the source of truth in the right source, and helping them to be discerning. Like, these are things that parents just do. And technology compounds it or exacerbates a lot of these challenges.
Yeah, another component to it.
But it really is just the core of biblical training and parenting, is discipling a kid through what is now this pressure cooker of an environment, doing it with education enough that parents feel like, okay, I can have a conversation and not feel totally out of the loop.
Yeah, this just seems to be more unrelenting. It is. Right. There's a constant drumbeat going on with this, where some of the other issues in parenting, it's not a constant. And I think that's one of the reasons that parents just give in, because I think they get tired. They don't have answers. They don't know what kind of solutions are out there for them, which is one of the reasons I'm glad you're here to be able to, let's share what are some of the solutions when you're going to hand over this, like somebody said, a loaded weapon. That we, even as adults, understand, like, that's a dangerous thing right there. We need to protect ourselves, our own hearts from this thing. How much more should we be protecting our children? So John's the host, so I don't want to go there before he wants to, but I'm interested, like, what's available for parents out there to protect, not maybe even themselves too, but to protect their children.
Yeah, so that's a good tease, but we're not going to go there
There you
yet.
go. See, John's the host.
So,
yanked.
so Brian, so before we get there, first, two questions for you. First, how did you navigate the 12-year-olds, 14, 15-year-olds who really wanted this, but you were like, no, 16 is our thing?
So my 15-year-old has a shared iPad that she uses when it's allowed. It's kind of a checkout privilege. She doesn't have a phone. Of course, our 22 and 24-year-olds have their own devices. But no, we just have a 15-year-old that's under that age of kind of the management still, and she does not have her own phone. If she needs a device, when we leave the house, I have a lockdown iPhone that she can use to call us, and we can call her. So most people don't have home phones anymore. So a spare device is always helpful, but there are controls that you can put on it to make it just a phone, just for the contacts you want, just for the favorite contacts, just during the time you want. So allowing it with restrictions is the model that we provide. And then it grows with responsibility. I mean, we want this to be a training moment that absolutely grows up with them and that they learn how to adapt to the world that they're going to live in.
Yeah. So how did you guys gauge responsibility? I mean, is it grades? Is it chores? Like, what was it that told you they are responsible, so now they will get this?
Well, for us, it depended on the age that we were talking about. So the responsibility to have an iPad and play a video, they're sitting next to us, and so that was pretty easy. But gauging the responsibility for us was we looked at who are they hanging out with, what kinds of things are they interested in, what do I think they're going to go to on that phone when I give it to them. And so that was where the presentation came in. Like if they would have just given a 2-minute presentation, like I think I'll be good with it. It's like, no, I don't think so. You haven't thought about this long enough. So it was really just helping them verbalize how are they going to use this. And of course, at times we tied it to privileges or responsibilities or, the favorite parent thing. You give your child something they really want, and then you take it away from them the next day as punishment. That's not a good plan most of the time, by the way. But we did all those pitfalls too. It was just like, how mature are they in things? And that helped to gauge things more than any other metric.
So Brian, how about you guys? One second. How about you guys? How did you gauge that they're responsible? Like you're doing that right now.
Absolutely. So it's through a lot of conversations, obviously, asking the whys. And why are you trying to get access to that? Why would you need to use that now? And not being interrogative, but just more, it's a conversation. To learn, yeah. And then, just practically, I turn on screen time and reporting, and I'd have them sit down with me and review their screen time each week. Say, how much time are you spending on music, research, the Bible app, sermons, typing things up? What is it you're working on productivity-wise? And then not really to justify the time, but as a self-reflection. It's a really good coaching moment when you can have them sit down, because I'm a data guy. I'm like, let's look at the data. Mm-hmm. What are you spending your time on? And let's check your heart against that and then reflect your priorities based on where you put your time. And that would measure responsibility, not just the data, but the reaction to it. So I'm looking for a lot of hey, how do you feel about that? Do you think spending whatever it was amount of time on the internet was a good use of time? And do you think that was a redeemed thing that you did? Do you think that, did you get exposure to stuff? Did you look at anything that you were frustrated by? Did something make you angry? Comparison syndrome on even text messages with friends. Sometimes they just get really upset on a text chat. I'd ask them, do you think maybe you need to mute that? Leave that text chat? So have discussion about that. And we'd measure responsibility level based on how the reactions to those questions turned out. So not just the data, but it starts a conversation, and it helps them own the data. It helps them own what their time and attention and really their loyalty is tied to.
Yeah, I think for our oldest one, then it was a surprise that she got a phone for 8th grade graduation. She'd been asking because she had friends, same thing. And we would just kind of put it off and go, we'll figure out when the timing is right, continue to be trustworthy. And so for her, it was just an amazing surprise. And so then because of that, it became, a motivator of, look, this has been given to you. Here's this list of rules that you need to sign off on. And there's a lot of those rules that we talked about here of just being able to kind of keep it together. So then the other two, he said, now that's not a guarantee you're going to get one when you graduate from 8th grade. And so they saw that then as a motivator, Ultimately, we hope motivation is in Christ, but there is that outward motivation of if you show yourselves to be faithful and obedient, good grades, all of those things kind of together as a whole, then you too might get one for 8th grade graduation. And so it ended up being that way for every one of them. They got the same list. We actually maybe added a few things as we learned, to that list and that original list that was given out. I noticed I had several different copies. And so I think we had added some things to it based on experience and learning that. But so that first one was a surprise. And because of the weight of joy in that became a motivator to keep that responsibility in check. And then the other two, it was okay, I see that as a goal, that if I want a phone, I'm not going to get it anytime before 8th grade graduation, but I don't want to do anything that would jeopardize that. And so it just became a motivator, and good gospel conversations along the way as to what that was. And so that really helped, I think,
Great.
In that golden ticket. We want that golden ticket,
Gotcha. So Brian, it's kind of shocking to hear that these tech giants did not allow their kids to have technology. So I think there's some of the obvious dangers, I think, that are on technology. But are there others that we don't think about? Are there others that are incredibly dangerous that are just they're not? If you were to do a survey of what are the most dangerous things about having a phone, that wouldn't even show up on that list with normal people. So help us understand those.
I mean, like Dave mentioned, I was just in London with my son. We were launching a tech product that's a safe phone for kids solution in London. And we met with a child psychologist who talked about, the fact that this is now clinically diagnosed syndrome, that kids are being, exhibiting addictive behaviors to social media, uniquely classifying that as a psychological problem. That's a really obvious one, actually. Like the fact that they just now came up with a criteria for it really just bundles in with, well, it's an addictive thing. Okay, we knew that. What they're finding, though, is that learning disabilities have been significantly increasing. The ability for kids to retain knowledge, to take on learning comprehension, attention span, the other things that have just been gobbled up by technology. And so when I've talked about how these eras of tech evolution have progressed, we saw the kind of .com era was about finances and banking and all that. Well, the second wave in era was social media, and that was literally the attention economy. Tech companies were attacking your attention and monetizing it in smaller and smaller chunks. And so what they attack even with kids is, can we captivate their attention in smaller and smaller chunks? And that trains the brain. At a formidable developmental year, that is a point when a child's brain is forming to understand risk reward, benefit from learning. What kind of comprehension can they derive from content they read? And when they're immersed in technology, their attention span is minuscule. Their ability to retain and even comprehend knowledge is just destroyed in so many educational settings. So it's changed the educational context of children. The immersion of technology has changed how kids learn. And schools are finding that. Test scores reflect it. So there's the educational side, the psychological side, the protection side. And we work with Tim Tebow and a group of investors that work on combating exploitation and human trafficking. And the human trafficking epidemic is just horrific. I mean, it's a whole different topic that we don't have time to get into. But that exposure, exploitation, and trafficked victim survivor spectrum and progress is it's something that is just it's touching every neighborhood in America now. I mean, if you don't know someone who's had a kid that's been exploited, you will. And that's a problem, that we've got just millions of kids being exploited online and exploited to the point that I personally know of situations with law enforcement that we've worked with where kids are committing suicide. And it's because of either the comparison syndrome, the self-worth and devaluation from social media, from comparison, or through sextortion scams. And sextortion and romance scams I'm hearing about weekly from people. And those things result in all kinds of problems, obviously, with kids being kidnapped because of online exploitation, with kids being exploited online into doing things that they obviously should never even consider, kids from church homes, pastors' kids that I've heard that get sucked into these things, and their lives are ruined. They're in counseling for life if they make it through that. So that's a whole different area and spectrum that you don't like to talk too much about because it's terrible, but it's becoming more and more commonplace.
But you're bringing it up because it's not like these kids went to some seedy, weird website in the dark web in the middle of no, it's because they were on a normal site that anybody would be on.
These are kids
right?
that are playing Roblox, or they're playing Minecraft, or they're just on, TikTok, and then they're chatting with somebody, and then it develops a relationship, and then they begin a conversation with them, and then they build a friendship, and then they exploit themselves, and then they end up in a really bad situation. And it's happening to kids in every demographic and every area of the country.
Yeah, and again, it's not just with the phone, right?
Right.
It's with these gaming systems
for
as
sure.
well. They all have headsets, and they can communicate with people around the world.
Yeah.
As long as you let somebody into your game, you can turn on the two-way communication, and then they just start as you're playing, oh, yeah, that's great. Where do you live? As you're playing a game, and the kids aren't thinking about it.
I was just talking with a friend this morning. He has a company called GameSafe. He's a Christian guy. He's got 2 kids, and his daughters were exploited online through gaming. And so he started a company called GameSafe to help protect from that, because millions of kids are getting exploited and exposed online through gaming. And you think of the chats and the exposure that offers kids. And it seems like it's innocuous. They're just playing a game. It's a simple, but it can't just stay that way when evil pervades and it's not held back. And that's the challenge that we're against now.
So we've talked about some practical things. We've talked about dangers. Now solutions. What are some things that non-negotiable every parent should really be doing when it comes to technology?
So, there is so much investment that's gone into this, everything from trying to do legislative things of, protecting for age verification, which our governor vetoed, unfortunately, to try to make phones and devices restricted by default for minors that are registering it. I actually went and testified on behalf of Arizona parents last year to the Arizona House and Senate. It was passed in House and Senate, and the governor vetoed it. So we're going, okay, we can't get legislative support for this. So we need to build tech. We need to build solutions. And now there are just a ton of products coming to market soon that will help you protect your iPhones, help you protect your gaming systems. But I would start, again, before you start slapping solutions on and paying for products, start with the self-reflection of how am I using tech? Let's start here. How are parents managing their own technology? And when we need to make corrections and course correct some of our behaviors and patterns, do it immediately. And then reflect that to our kids. Confess to our kids, hey, I've allowed tech to be something in my life that it shouldn't. Let's have a conversation about how that might have happened in your life, how I may not have modeled that well. And then talk about with them healthy boundaries, restrictions around tech. The challenge is that most parents have already allowed it. And now they're trying to figure out, can I reel it back? Can I regain some ground? And I think that's a really great opportunity for us, especially as Christians, to say, that's okay. It's okay to say, hey, I screwed up. I need to back up. We need to take some steps back. And we collectively as a family need to establish some ground rules. Maybe start with an agreement.
It's really healthy.
A responsible tech agreement is a great way to reset that button.
It's always never too late to start doing the right thing. It maybe take a little bit of energy to retrace steps and everything, but it's never too late. You can't go, well, it's too late now. It's never too late.
Absolutely.
So I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, it's perfect. And I think what you shared earlier about the agreement is something we recommend as well, because even if you're not going to hold them to the letter of an agreement, you started the conversation and you established some boundaries there. So I'd say start with that. Start with your own heart. Get an agreement in place that starts a conversation, and then start to put controls on. Whether you know how to do that, and you can go to our website, protectyounghearts.com. I'm not making any money off of it. It's just a resource for you guys. We'll teach you how to protect your tech. And
so if someone goes to your website and wants to do that, what would they look for?
So we've got articles, blogs, we've got some technical tips, and we've got a solution. We've actually got a product called Guardian Lock that my son came up with. He asked me last year, hey, we can't get people to do the right thing, so maybe we just need to build the tech. So we actually trademarked the brand, patented a solution, and built a product, and we're releasing it to market. And the solution is really, how do we make iPhones safe and Apple iPads? Because there's not a solution that does that well. So we built a solution that kids can't break, that parents can control, and allows them to have a safe phone, like restoring an iPhone to a phone, which is a crazy concept, and then allow them to grow up in responsibilities. Not just make it a dumb phone, but allow them to put the GameSafe app on it, or Team Snap, or their kids' scheduling, and do that in a way that allows parents to manage the tech, not allow the tech to manage them.
Oh, that's huge.
One thing you said was to look at your own heart as you're a parent. So just thinking about when we were telling our kids not to drive while holding their phone. Yeah. And then they're like, okay. And then we get in the car and I'm like looking at my phone and I'm driving. And they're kind of like, why can you do that? And, the answer, like, well, I've been driving for this long without any incidents. It's like, but why can't you, why aren't you following your own advice? So if you can't go from your house to church without checking your Apple Watch or your phone, you too are addicted to your phone, and you need to own up to it and then teach yourself how not to do that realistically, and then train your children. You can't really train them with something that you yourself don't know how to do, so.
Yeah, my wife takes this approach, and we're involved in marriage ministry with Dave and doing a lot of work with, couples that are struggling in their marriage are usually struggling in parenting. So sometimes you say, well, why is parenting broken? Why are we having a hard time? It goes back to, and I forgot if you mentioned this, but you got to get on the same page. Husbands and wives have to sit down and hash this out and say, are we in agreement on how we should manage technology in our homes? And it starts with the couple. How do we manage it amongst ourselves? And men need to step up and say sometimes, I need to confess sin. I need to get forthright with this. I need to lay before the Lord a problem that I'm struggling with before you can shepherd your kids through this. And then you need to sit down with your spouse and say, here's my phone, and you have access to it anytime you want. Mm-hmm. And likewise, you have access. So let's just set that aside and say, now the tech is not a barrier between us. Don't allow that foothold in your family to continue, because then it affects your parenting. It affects how you raise your kids if your marriage is broken. So the idolatry of heart that comes into some of our lifestyles and the way we live is going to be passed on to our kids if we don't first repent of that. So I'd start there and then work into, okay, and how do we parent our kids? Well, we do it through a position of humility. And that's where I think that is. So then practically, all right, let's say you're there and you've worked through these steps and you say, how do I protect it? There are layers of protections that you would do with anything else. But the challenge is this, like when we think of teaching our kids to drive, and you guys aren't there yet, but we've trained 3 kids to drive. You guys, 3 or 4 kids. There's a lot to learn about driving. And when you train your kids how to drive and they're becoming young adults, you sometimes go like, man, there's a lot of things around you discernment-wise that you can't really teach them until there's some experience. Mm-hmm. But there's other things that you think, I don't need to tell them how to turn an airbag on, right? There's certain things that it should just work, and you should just know that it protects the kids. And we need tech solutions for that. We have them so that you can focus on the heart training of how to use it responsibly. And so this training of seatbelts and airbags in technology is now becoming a lot more simplified so that you can focus on the heart training of why do you want to have access to that app? Let's check in on what the purpose of it is. Let's talk about what your usage in the last week has been. What's your screen time reflect, and then get into those level discussions next.
Yeah, I'm just reminded of something a guy named Virgil Walker said recently on a podcast. He said, that the tech and the social media is like a digital slot machine.
Yeah. Right?
You're always pulling it to see what the next thing is. Like Facebook has most of a picture you can see. So you're doing this doom scrolling. Mm-hmm. So when you teach patience to your kids, do we demonstrate that as we're trying to get a hold of our parent, of our spouse? Yeah. Like I called you. When did you call me? 30 seconds ago. You didn't text me back. Well, I was talking with somebody. Well, you got to let me know. I was worried about you. It's like, where is our trust in God as we're trying to teach our children to not look for that, actually a dopamine hit, mm-hmm. right? It's comparative for these likes on Facebook and stuff and all that. How are we trusting the Lord, and are we patient when we communicate even with our spouse? Mm-hmm. Like there used to be a time when, well, you're going to work and then I'll see you later tonight. There is no way to call each other.
Right.
So.
Well, and my kids know more about tech than I do, but I'm not ignorant to it, and ignorance isn't bliss. Just because I won't catch up to them because of the age that they've lived in and the things that they do. But that doesn't give me any excuses to say, "Oh, I don't know anything." Parents, I really encourage you. Ignorance is not bliss. You right. At least have to know some of the key things. And I think Blogspot like yours and other places is a very helpful tool to kind of at least get up to speed on what you should be watching out for.
I tried to use. Just real quick, I tried to use that. You're wasting all your time, playing games. And then one of my kids actually monetized one of their videos, and then they get a check for thousands of dollars in the mail. I'm like, oh man, that argument's gone.
Yeah, show me how to do that.
I know. Daddy can learn.
Well, guys, this is a topic that I'm sure we could spend multiple hours on, do multiple episodes on. But I want to wrap it up here. But before you go, I hope that if you have questions, if you have comments, that you put them down below, that you write it down. We'd love to do more shows on this and answer the specific questions you might have. If we didn't touch on something, we'd love to do that. And in an episode later on down the road of Redeeming Truth. Hey, don't leave yet. If you're part of the 75% of people that watch our content but haven't subscribed, this is your time. Go down and find that little subscribe button and click it. That way you will know every time we come out with more content here from Redeemer Bible Church. Also, if you would like to give to this ministry, this is the only way that this ministry can happen. Make sure to click the link down below to the give button and you can give to the ministry here at Redeemer. And then finally, if you want to know more about what's going on, check out this podcast right here.